Hello, everyone. Jeffrey T. Fertiller back with another Service Management Leadership Podcast, but we're doing something special. This is a Global ITAM Management Summit, and I'm pleased, very excited to have Pierce MacDonnell, Rory Canavan, Craig Guarente. Did I pronounce that right, Craig?
It's close, Guarente.
Guarente and Pam Fulmer. With the name like T. Fertiller, I mispronounce everybody else's name. So I apologize if I did that to you as well, Rory. So let's go around the horn, starting with you, Pierce.
Yes.
Who you are, your company, what you guys do.
Thank you. My name is Pierce MacDonnell, and I'm an IBM license expert, and have been an independent license consultant for the last 10 years, focusing for the last number of years in IBM. And you'll probably find my online persona is License Hawk. So if you're looking for tips, tricks, or notes, or just to drop me an email, pop over to License Hawk. Thank you.
Rory.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rory Canavan. I'm the founder and owner of SAM Charter, and where we differentiate from other organizations in the SAM space is to help organizations with the process and framework that sits around the technologies that you deploy to resolve any SAM or ITAM woes that you feel you have in your organization.
Craig.
Everyone, I'm Craig Guarente. I'm the founder for Palisade Compliance. Palisade is an independent management consulting firm that helps companies with their Oracle licensing, contract, and compliance challenges, so audits and negotiations and all that. Been doing that for about 9 years, and then I spent 16 years at Oracle before that, and I was their global vice president of contracts and business practices and audits, so 25 years in the Oracle ecosystem now.
Pam.
Hi, I'm Pam Fulmer. I'm a founding partner of Tactical Law Group here in San Francisco. And our firm specializes in licensing disputes, breaches of contract and copyright related issues. And we handle a lot of software audit defense. And we tangle with some of the most difficult ones out there, the Oracles, the Micro Focus, the Quests, etc. And I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Awesome group, isn't it, everyone? So let's get started. Let's jump right in. There's been some recent events and legal and all this sort of thing. If this was a year ago, I would have kicked it to Pierce and say about ILMT and Big Fix splitting off. But Pam, with the Oracle Rimini Street, there's been some legal wrangling going on, some decisions. Do you want to get us started on that?
Sure, happy to do it. So, Oracle has been fighting for years with other maintenance and support providers, and they're willing to go to the mat in those cases. And they've poured millions and millions of dollars into them. There are actually 2 litigations involving Rimini Street, both in Nevada, federal district court. And recently the court ruled on, granted a summary judgment motion, and in part and denied in part. But in the grant of the summary judgment motion, Oracle got some big wins. So how it's going to actually all come down when they eventually go to trial, I don't know. But, we can talk about some of those as well. But Oracle still continues to not have that many audit cases against its actual customers. So Oracle's willing to fight, against these maintenance providers. They're tangling again with HP, for example, but still, the audit lawsuits are few and far between. And it just goes to show that Oracle is worried about going to court over audits because of this VMware issue and others. And the whole audit issue is currently still being litigated in a securities class action lawsuit out here in federal court involving their audit bargain close tactics. And I'm happy to talk to folks about that as well, if that would be of interest.
And Oracle's got, that name has come up often during this COVID time, right? I don't want to get too far down the COVID trail, and I'm going to kick this to Craig, but there's this practice of audit aggressive, finding deficiencies and then pushing to cloud and things of that nature, those tactics. Is that fair, Craig?
Yeah, I think that, the tactic of audit bargain, it used to be audit bargain close, and now it's audit bargain cloud. We've seen that. The city of Denver was a great example of that a couple of years ago. And it doesn't even have to be that they find non-compliance. It just they need to get the client worried about non-compliance, right? We think there's a $40 million non-compliance thing, so give us $10 million and you'll be fine. But that tactic is nothing new, right? Vendors do this all the time when they want customers to do something. So it used to be audit bargain by database, audit bargain by Exadata, audit bargain by EBS. Now it's audit bargain cloud. So the tactic is absolutely not new, and it's not unique to Oracle either.
Right. And what's interesting, Craig, to your point, is when Oracle comes out with its final audit report, it doesn't even quantify the amount, okay, in the final report that the licensee owes. They just have the number of processors or number of licenses that they're short. And that is such a huge number. We call that the shock number. And that's to soften you up, the customer, because as you said, that when they do the math, they figure out that's a $40 million number. But, so it sounds like a real bargain when Oracle offers the $10 million settlement, when in reality, you may only have 500 grand worth of non-compliance. So pushing back is something that I know that you're very good at, and it's very important.
Oh, recent events. Pierce.
Yeah, just to Pamela's point there, pushing back is actually really important. You do not want to be seen as an easy target, first of all, because it will get around the market, but also very often just the resistance alone is already going to knock 20-30% off of the compliance gap, because keep in mind that ultimately the customer does have the raw information under the hood, and they have the evidence, and it's so much of it is down to interpretation. And in particular, there's a reason why very few of the big vendors want to go to court, because if you were to scrutinize some of these contracts in the Oracle world, the famous white papers, or for educational purposes only, is so laughable, really. In the IBM world, there's a serious question over whether they can have this click agreements, or every time you renew your SNS, that you've suddenly signed up to the latest password advantage terms, that you can do this without actually explicitly doing it. These are very contentious areas in the legal world, and the vendors don't want to go in there. So pushing back, challenging, and very often just the vendors are not that much wiser with regard to the license position, the license rules, or even the interpretation of metrics than you are. They just talk a better game.
And they come in at heavy-handed, right? That's the other piece.
And you can come in heavy-handed. Probably one thing I would say also when it comes to the particularly the audit for any vendors is but Oracle are particularly good at it, is the jumping over the project and going straight to the CFO. And really got to preempt that, because I've been involved in long extended audits, and then to suddenly be settled because of what we call golf course settlements, and where the senior managers went to the CFO, they had a conversation, and a deal was done. And no one's talking about compliance, to Craig's point about just they put these things here, and they just want to settle it. So
Right.
Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, if you don't push back, they're going to be back sooner and harder, so that's really important against all of these folks. And the point you just raised about IBM in terms of these click wrap agreements, I'm seeing the same thing with Quest. So Quest has early contracts that basically have a clause that say you can't amend it unless there's a writing signed by both parties, and it's a perpetual license. But then now they're coming in and saying that all of these click wrap agreements that were sent out with the software maintenance and support renewals every year are the controlling contracts. And you got to push back on that, because Quest every year change their contracts to make them more beneficial to Quest and to hurt their licensees.
They're not your friends. This is the whole thing. They're not your friends. So let's talk trends, and each of you all have very different specialties, and that's why I think this panel is awesome. Let's talk trends in your specialty. Start with Rory. What trends are you seeing?
So I think increasingly, particularly on LinkedIn as well, because I seem to spend far too much time on LinkedIn as it is. I'm seeing a lot more around robotic process automation. And that's of a particular interest to me because, of course, I focus on process. I haven't yet seen anybody grasp the SAM nettle and say, right, okay, here's an RPA solution for your processes around SAM or ITAM. There's some tools that sort of hint at it, and I think ServiceNow is probably leading in respect of workflows. Sherwell are up there too. But there are other tools that I think could step up and sort of embrace it somewhat more. But equally too, I think there's a definite use case for a lot of the core RPA product sets, the likes of, say, Kofax, UiPath, all of those, Blue Prism, to step forward and say, here's our RPA initiative around SAM or ITAM. And we fit it around the SAM tools, we fit it around the inventory tools, and we fit it around the contract and support tools. So they're like deadly nightshade. Then at that point, they're sat in the middle of the IT estate, actually making all of this integration seamless.
Yes, so they integrate downward or upward, whichever way you view it, versus waiting for the tooling to come to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good thought. Pierce?
I guess there's probably two parts, the specific, which is IBM, my area, and then there's just SAM in general. In the IBM space, look, it's all moved to the cloud. The big push is with regard to the dual licensing. So essentially that's a natural transition between, I have perpetual license, I can keep them perpetual for a year, but then I lose it, it fades away essentially once you move into the cloud. So that side of things. So, and also just the huge push in terms of, as everyone says, all audits are settled with a cloud deal. And it's maybe not, some vendors are more push it than others, but it's very much the trend. Also, what was interesting recently was just all the discounting has been removed for a huge, about 5,000 products on renewals for on-prem. But of course, cloud remains untouched. So there's many subtle pushes here to basically move to the cloud. COVID, of course, is very much changing the mindset. We've all known about, cloud offerings and Office 365 being a very good example of it. But now the work from home culture, it's very much going to be cloud first. It was talked about, now it will be the mantra. The general observation, of course, for me is probably around the tool vendors, actually. There's a whole new generation of cloud-only optimization tools and management tools coming up, any amount of them. I do believe that's, by the way, is tied into RPA, because cloud is ideal for automation because the variables are fewer. But and then beyond that, though, look, that's not, you can't miss out. ServiceNow is coming like a juggernaut into the industry. It's in the service management is dominated, but it is absolutely, the rate of development of their innovation is striking, and it's striking in comparison to the lack of innovation from the other vendors. Now, I will say BMC and Flexera are catching up fast. They're acquiring their way, basically. And they're trying to create a platform standard, as in they're the ones going out buying service management extensions or procurement extensions or e-license procurement add-ons. So there are some observations from my own side.
So Pierce brings up something that I've seen, and you guys probably saw it too, is where BMC was stagnant in their innovation, and ServiceNow ran right by them, and now they're playing catch up, because they had this on-prem stronghold, and now they're trying to catch up staff-wise, and their customers are struggling to know what to do in that regard. Is that fair, Pierce?
It is indeed, and have been involved in a number of tool procurement consulting on that. And 2 years ago, I'll be honest, BMC and Flexera were looking a little static. They are not now. They have lifted their game, but it's because they're being absolutely pushed. And it's the rate of innovation. That's what's quite striking about ServiceNow. It's integrated, certainly, but clearly they have the pockets to develop and innovate. And they have very much targeted ITAM and SAM Pro as their leads in the SAM space.
Yes. Pam, trends?
Well, what what I'm seeing is I'm starting to see more licensees going into court for declaratory relief. And I think you're going to see that trend continue, because as we go to the cloud, you know, now if a vendor sends out a license termination notice, you know, if you have perpetual licenses, you can still keep running, even though you run to court, you know, and file your motion and try to get your preliminary injunction. With cloud, they can just flip a switch and turn you off. So that means there's going to be a lot more leverage on the software publisher side that people are going to have to contend with. And I think you're going to see more lawsuits and more preliminary injunction motions, because people are not going to be able to have that critical, you know, cloud turned off for very long. And so if these software publishers get tough and threaten termination notices and then flip off the switch, they're going to get embroiled in a lot more litigation.
Wow, that is something to think about. Craig, what trends are you seeing?
Well, if we focus on cloud for a second, there is a desire by companies to sort of have the freedom to do what they want to do that is best for their business. And what we're seeing is multi-cloud environments, hybrid cloud environments, some stuff on-prem, some stuff in cloud. And clients do not want to be locked in to one vendor. So, you know, in the Oracle space, you know, they want to run Oracle on AWS. They want to run it on Google Cloud. They want to run it on Azure. They want to run it on IBM. We don't see many customers who want to run Oracle on Oracle just because of the vendor lock-in. And there's this conflict now because, you know, the support business for on-prem is really profitable for Oracle. It's the last time they provided numbers that you could decipher for support, it was $20 billion a year, 95% margin, right? So $19.5 billion of profit. Their cloud is only, you know, only 60%. So every time these clients, especially with COVID, they want to save money. They want to lower their Oracle costs. And Oracle will keep coming back and saying, hey, I know you're spending $5 million a year on support. We'll get it down to $2 million a year. Just give us $10 million a year for cloud. And the customer's like, well, now I'm spending 12 with you. So there's just this conflict in the industry where clients want to spend less and have freedom, and particularly Oracle obviously wants them to spend more and lock them into Oracle. So it's sort of the last bastion for freedom here is, you know, if you have everything on Oracle, like Pam said, it is so much easier for that vendor to flip the switch and turn you off and audit you and find you out of compliance and do all those things that it's really hard for them to do now. So we're in the early stages of that battle still. Leverage,
right?
Yeah.
All right, so this great conversation so far, just keeping the ball rolling. To me, software license is striking the balance between paying for what you're using and using for what you're paying for, right? Because it's like anything else, if you're over licensed, you're paying too much. If you're under licensed, you're subject to audit and paying way too much. How do you advise clients, this is open for anyone to jump in, but how do you advise people to strike that balance? Because they are going to have some growth in their usage, you know, that they may or may not know about when they sign their deals, yet they don't want to leave money on the table or leave themselves open to this risk. Anybody?
From my point of view, on this question, I tell my clients, you guys should, first of all, when I do audits, I actually retain technical experts to help me advise my clients on the legal issues. And so, you know, even if I'm not going to continue to be involved in something because an audit is done, I say you really need to hire some of these technical experts because you think you may understand the licensing, but you don't. And so you need them to come in, you need them to help out and do an audit with you and to really help you optimize this. And so I think being penny wise and pound foolish is a mistake for companies. They need to hire technical experts to help them out.
I'd very much, I think that the three or four of us in this call would support that, Pamela. From my perspective, and again, I take I suppose a vendor specific and then general, with regard to IBM, there are actually only a couple of things you need to really watch closely, and that very much applies for any of the vendors I find. In my world, it's ILMT. You need to just watch everything that's running in a virtualized environment and the tools that IBM accept as the definitive answer of consumption. Now, that's not to say that rules will be bent, over deployments will occur, but at least if you're watching and measuring it and at least seeing it coming at you and having the expertise, and you will need to bring in expertise wherever you get it from to analyze it, because you will not, your team in-house will not be able to keep up with the latest trends, be it Oracle, Microsoft, IBM, or whichever vendor it is. But very often there's certain core metrics, certain basic things you have to watch. I'm sure Craig will comment regarding Oracle on a virtualized environment in a moment, but in my world, it's all about ILMT, it's processor-based licensing, PVU, and very much keeping on top of that and bringing in expertise. Your in-house team are not going to be able to keep up with the trends. They're not going to be on top of it. And these are multi-million-dollar assets you're talking about here. It takes a trivial, just a very simple deployment in a virtualized world. You literally drag and drop an icon and you can provision an entire stack. That's $1 million liability to your company. So monitoring and having expertise to advise you on it.
Pierce and I were talking offline about somebody setting up mirroring or cloning an environment, and now you have this expansion. You know, somebody's doing it trying to be technically savvy, and now they've opened this Pandora's box wide open.
Yeah.
Rory or Craig?
Compliance is just it's such a moving target, and you know, sometimes there's no right answer. You know, if you think about it, there are some clients, depending on your view and sort of how you're looking at their environment, they can be in compliance and out of compliance at the same time. You know, think virtualization, right? If you read the contract, you could argue that they're in compliance. If you look at some policy document that's online, that's specifically not in your contract, you might say they're out of compliance. So this idea of, you know, perfect compliance, it's something that has to be managed, it has to be monitored, and every customer is going to make their own decision on sort of their risk profile, their ability, you know, to fight the vendor or to want to sort of buy more licenses. At least in the Oracle space, it's just not black and white. It's a big area of gray that we have to walk our clients through.
And contracts are gray. There's purposefully people. All right, Pam, I don't mean to step in your area of expertise, so correct me, but these contracts are purposefully vague. They are purposefully not prescriptive, because then you would know how to be compliant. Does that seem fair?
I think that is true, but on the Oracle contract, I feel that it's not ambiguous at all. I mean, the metric is installed and or running. That's been the metric since, you know, 2000. That's the language of the contract. And that has a very technical meaning. And Oracle, by pointing to non-binding policy documents that, you know, the integration clause closes out, you shouldn't fall for that. And we see it all the time. Our clients do not pay on VMware, okay? They just don't. It's not, in our view, part of the contract. The contract is not ambiguous to us. And installed and or running has a simple meaning. And the position that Oracle takes, we don't think a court would actually, you know, put their stamp of approval on that. And that's why we think Oracle is also nervous about that, and why you're not seeing lawsuits that have any legs that involve any of these issues. I mean, I represented Cogent Communications in an audit-related case. We resolved that within 3.5 months. The Mars case was only, I think, 2.5 months. There was a recent case filed by Oracle. I have the name here, which I'll find. That settled in like a month and a half. I mean, Oracle just doesn't want these audit cases out, especially while the Sunrise firefighters case is going on. That's the big securities class action. And so any threat that this might get out there to a public filing is something I believe they're extremely worried about.
They don't want any precedent that's bad for stuff. All right.
Because they're making so much money on this. Okay, you know, a lot of people pay this. Okay, a lot of people pay it. They get scared. They hear that Oracle has a big reputation from all these remedy license, lawsuits and the HP lawsuits and this, and so they're worried about that and they buckle. And, what I try to do is prop them up and, say, I don't think you're going to get sued about this because I don't think this is a good position. If they are non-compliant in some areas, then they probably need to remediate that. But VMware is not one of those areas in our view.
And if I could just jump in there, the Mars case, I love the Mars case. So we actually represented Mars through that whole thing, not from a legal perspective, but from a sort of licensing expert perspective. And if you follow the court filings, Mars actually filed against Oracle and it was quickly withdrawn, right? So, we can't talk about anything after that, but Mars is still in business and still a client of ours. So, none of these vendors want these practices sort of adjudicated, right? Because there's so much money that's out there. And it is right now, the way it is, it's just so profitable for them. So why risk it?
Right. Yeah. And the Mars case, as you mentioned, I was at the law firm that filed that was Aaron Fox and out of the San Francisco and DC offices. And I was at that firm at the time. Looking at the filing and all the documents, I mean, that is Oracle's biggest nightmare because all of those documents, all the communications between Oracle legal department attorney Chad Russell and Mars is out there. And that's where they make the bogus VMware argument for everybody to see. And I think from what I've seen is that, it's my opinion that, Oracle legal is supposed to use termination notices or threats of termination, breach notices to try to, get some leverage, get the clients to, settle, but they never intended that to go all the way. That was a nightmare for Oracle when that lawsuit got filed, in my opinion.
Pride cometh before the fall, huh? All right, so moving on to the next question. And so each of us looks at this from a different angle, and that's why I think this is awesome. But I see software asset management as a business problem, not a tool problem. There are a lot, we talk about tooling, there are a lot that see it as a tool issue. And Rory has an experience in the process side, business side. Why do you think people see this as tooling first, and how would you convince them, Rory?
So I think it comes off the tail end of having been the other end of one of those audits. There is a knee-jerk reaction to we've got to do something about SAM or ITAM. We've got to do something, and very rarely does an organization hold a mirror up to itself and say the problem is within. It's what we do. SAM and ITAM are participation sports. They are not. It's not a case of I will get fit because I own a new pair of trainers. It's you putting the miles in and putting the steps in that are going to get you fit. So the obvious leap then is, well, we've got to apply technology to the situation. So we're dealing with a technical company, we'll apply more technology. And what's paid for my house and my car and my very nice lifestyle has been those organizations that have invested in SAM suites, have found 6 months later that they're not getting the results that they want. And are then of the mind, well, because we're not getting the results that we want, we might have to ship that out and get another SAM suite in place that will give us the results that we want. And we have to sort of drag people back from the fire potentially and say, no, it's not the SAM suite, it's you. It's what you're doing. It's not what the tool is telling you. So, and I've got a particular use case on my website where I did a very short piece of work for a particular client, and the person concerned who got me in within 15 months got 2 promotions out of it and a heap more responsibility. So that is the best use case I ever had. It was the personal and professional satisfaction out of doing the job right that saw them, hop, skip, and jump up the corporate ladder as a result of it. So, and that was really heartwarming off the back of it. So yeah.
So 2 use cases I always use, and these are ones I've seen personal. So I tell this, and you all may chuckle because you've seen similar, or you can't believe this happened. But at a previous job, a large consulting firm, I was on their in-house and had the ITAM group, and they had a specific Adobe title, and it showed green. hey, we're licensed, we're in compliance. We have 16 of these. They were using 0. So yes, they were compliant, but it wasn't solving their business problem of spending. And so kind of to your point, right, Rory, like, why are we spending money on this? The other is there's a large US insurance company, I'm not going to say which, but they have a 5-6 person group that saves them 7 to 10 million every year just by their process of making sure they're licensed well, they're protected from audits. They have goals that this company uses to offset the cost of, you know, the increases in labor and software raises, you know, the escalations every year. This one software asset management group offsets all those. It's pretty interesting. And so to me, that's why I'm always passionate about software asset management, IT asset management, because it's a business problem to be solved.
So Jeff, I appreciate that I'm encroaching on others' time, so my apologies, but just to sort of flip against the previous question too, how do we actually assess value? Businesses increasingly now, particularly I think because of the way service management presents IT to the business, they don't care about Microsoft or Oracle or IBM. They care about messaging or ERP or CRM. It's the service function that they do care about. Now, if that service technology stack is made up of software from multiple vendors, trying to actually get that view or perspective for TCO and ROI, that's what senior management want to see. Rarely, cold day in hell, do they actually proactively say, where's my compliance position with Microsoft or Oracle? You know, they wait for the audit letter to come in before that happens. So I think that's another way to sort of strike a view of value through the IT estate. And again, we've got sort of support around that activity on our white papers page as well. So yeah.
Good deal.
I also think that Sam, it used to be very much used as a focus of it's a counting exercise. We've got X amount of laptops, PCs. This is because of its hardware background, really, where the value was actually the physical device. But that's completely shifted now to the point where the physical device is quite literally a commodity. It's the phone in your hand, or it's just the whatever I use. It's the glass pane I access. The assets are behind the scenes or software. But more importantly is, I think it's been treated for too long as a technical exercise. And I know probably all of us in this call here and many in the audience are coming from a technical background. But I believe it is very much a financial thing. It is an asset management. And I mean, when I talk about assets, not physical assets anymore, it's financial assets. It's trying to get the maximum value out of an investment I have made with a vendor. And it just so happens to be that is software, but what version edition? That just is a measure of consumption. How it's used is a technical exercise. How we measure and manage it is a financial one. The move to the cloud is very much going to bring that into focus because it's now an OPEX, where you're literally looking at it. A bill comes in every month and someone has to say, what did I just buy? Is this bill on budget? And the mindset and the conversations need to shift to that of financial control. And which is actually evident from many of the cloud asset management now is being part of the procurement function and is part of finance. And that's the mindset we need to be adapting here. These are assets that just happen to be software. We need to manage the contract, we need to manage the value, and we need to manage the terms and conditions around it. The counting bit it's the bookkeeping. The real action is going to be in the managing and getting that value out of it. And to your own point, I love that example of where the team were basically targeted with how do we reduce by X million each year? That's a fantastic way of viewing something. It's not about counting anymore. It's about how do we maximize value? That's a mindset. Just like other teams are targeted to reduce costs or targeted to maximize value, it's a mindset.
Craig, Pam, are you guys okay? Do you have anything on this?
Not from me.
Well, I'm going to bring out my Oracle hat now. So again, I spent many years there. And when we would talk to customers about sort of how they run their businesses, we would talk about this process of automation. And automation was the last piece. So it's simplify, standardize, centralize, automate in that order, right? So simplify, standardize, centralize, automate. Because what we were seeing at Oracle was customers would go right to automate, right? And they wanted to automate a bad process or a very decentralized process that was unautomatable, right? So you want to go through that process. I think it's human nature. We just want a tool. We want to hit the easy button. And if I focus on the Oracle piece, there's no tool that will tell you if you're really in compliance with Oracle. And I say that because if there was a tool, Oracle would use it to audit, right? So there's a tool has a component of that process. And I love it when we go into a client and they have a tool. It's better than if they don't. But is it going to give them the final answer of, are you in compliance? You know, that's where I think customers, because those vendors, those software vendors make a lot of promises about sort of how their software works. And the reality is just a little bit different.
It's that old analogy, isn't it? Would you entrust a thermometer to cure you of your cold? No.
I like that.
I do like that.
That's new to me. I never heard that one.
Okay.
I hear new ones all the time on this. A few episodes back on the podcast, we had a gentleman who's a deputy CIO for the U.S. Army, and he's based not in the U.S. And he said many times IT is like a self-licking ice cream cone. And I had never heard that one either. And so anyway, I enjoy hearing the differences. So let's talk audits for a couple questions as we end this episode. And this is for all of you, but what is the benefit of bringing in expertise, whether it's legal or vendor specific expertise, when you get this audit notice, right? Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, they come and they say, we want to audit you. Why should they bring in expertise?
I mean, what I see all the time is that, you know, and I can't tell you how many times I'm told that the technical team, you know, by the law department at a company, the technical team really knows what they're doing here, and they don't.
Right.
And that's why they do need technical help to, you know, understand these very complex rules. It's not because they're not good, and they are, but things are changing. And what we see a lot, we see so many of these. So we know like where we can press, and, you know, you guys do too, okay? Because you've seen what happens with negotiations, and we can bring that to bear. And then, you know, like I said, I always have a technical expert. So I hire technical consultants to assist me. And basically what I do is if I'm brought in, you know, while the audit is ongoing, I can help actually structure the correspondence in a way to make the best record for the licensee, rather than, you know, coming in when the client gets the shock number and the organization is really upset and IT heads might roll, you know, and so we've been able to guide folks, I think, to create the best record, to put them in the best position to have leverage to resolve the audit.
The earlier, the better is what I heard you say, Pam. Is that fair?
That is absolutely true, because, you know, it's better to actually shape what's going on than to just be handed this at the end. And then, you know, and the other thing, and I don't want to take up too much of everybody's time here, but, you know, keep old audit correspondence too. That's really important, because, you know, someone from Oracle or Micro Focus or whatever in a past audit may have told you that you could do something. And although they'll deny that you can rely on that, you know, you probably can. They probably stopped, which is this legal concept, from changing that position. So keep the correspondence, keep great records, use it against them.
My view on this is pretty simple. The professionals here are doing it every day of the week. Our full-time job is defending audits, preparing customers, either in terms of true-ups, license baselines, or ELAs or EA renewals. We live it in the same way that whatever business our client is in, they are experts in it. So when you have a crisis, and I can tell you an audit is a very interesting crisis to have. It's high value, it's high risk, it's high visibility, because I can tell the CFO has received that letter, so he knows all about it. You want to bring in the experts for that short period of time that maximizes your defense, and the people who are doing it as their daily job. Your team in-house might be very experienced, very knowledgeable, very capable. but they are not doing it every day. We are. And at the end of it, you'll say goodbye to us. You'll thank us for our work, pat us on the head, and hopefully pay our bill and our bonus. And but we're gone. On to the next one. Like everyone here, like I do on anything up to 30 major projects a year in the space. Quite literally, everyone here, I'd say we've done hundreds of audit defenses. Your team will do maybe one every 3 years, and chances are it won't be the same team. So that's why you need to bring in the professionals. Just like when I go to court, I go get my lawyer. I don't go reading up the books and hoping for the best that I can defend myself. Or if my car breaks down, I'm not much of a mechanic. I bring it to the guy who knows how to fix cars and who spends his days doing it. When it's an audit, you come and you get the professionals for that period of time.
And you mentioned the car example. The one I always think of is I drive a Volvo. And people in the US, car mechanics, they don't like Volvos. And so you have to go to these specialized ones that have the right tools. And that's the other, just the thought process, how things work. Craig or Rory?
So I think to hark back to the previous points that were raised, the reason you'd engage an expert is rather like Pam said, you will have people who will technically tinker as well. And one thing that we haven't perhaps touched on here is that concept of indirect licensing. So whilst various aspects of integrating different software from different software houses is technically achievable, the license doesn't necessarily support it, or if it does, you have to sort of dig deep and pay for it. And the classic case in point more recently over here was Diageo, the manufacturers of Guinness. They took their SAP ERP system and hooked it up to their CRM, and SAP absolutely wiped the floor with them in the courts. I think they took them for the tune of sort of 63 million UK. And that empowered SAP. They looked west. They looked west and looked to America, and they had another killing over there as well. So that's why. That's why you engage with experts, because what you want to make sure is that there is a lessons learned as well. You don't repeat the mistakes that might have put you in potentially hot water in the first place.
And even with you all and your expertise, I want to, since my skill set's similar to Rory's, not experts like Pam, Craig, and Pierce, I will say having even Rory that has a broader thought and here's how we need to structure it, there is value. And because the companies I've been in, they don't know what to do with an audit. They don't even know how to look at their contracts and how this should look against what our entitlements versus usage are. Is that fair, Rory?
Yeah. Always try and shrink the scope or get rid or de-risk. So it could be that, that letter comes through, it does come to the CFO, but it's couched in such a way that it's actually more a fishing expedition than it is a formal call against the audit terms and conditions of the contract. Straight to the bin with those things. Don't now. Admittedly, you may get an expert in to formally read that for you and give you that confirmation, but think of the world of pain you've saved, for that one day's engagement compared to the time you would absolutely waste thinking, oh, we've got to get the inventory, oh, we've got to get the entitlement, we've got to, jump through hoops. So yeah.
Craig.
Well, and again, we are just focused on Oracle, so I'd love to hear what other folks think about this, but at least with Oracle, if you get the audit letter, Oracle thinks you're out of compliance, right? It's not an accident. It's not a congratulations, you were randomly chosen. So, if you want to avoid an Oracle audit, make sure Oracle knows you're in compliance. So I think that's sort of, my biggest thing that I tell customers is something happened along your journey with Oracle where they think now there's money to be had and they want to get it from you. So that's sort of my thinking is, and very few Oracle audit customers, if we want to call that, from, people who are being audited by Oracle come out completely clean, right? Oracle says, we found nothing, right? So again, they might say you owe us nothing because we're going to forgive your sins here, but it's sort of a guilty until proven innocent thing, and it's really perilous for clients. A mistake could cost you millions.
Yeah, and especially the way that Oracle puts little traps and triggers in their software. I mean, they don't have license keys, so people can inadvertently trigger something, and then it's a I gotcha type situation. But yeah, what Craig said is definitely true. And but you got to push back, and also, and we can talk about this as well in the next segment. Don't be afraid to go to the Oracle legal department or the legal department at these software publishers, because oftentimes they're the ones that can get the thing resolved, because they advise their business that the business has risk and they should give. The salespeople tend to be really hardcore. They're trying to maximize the money. So sometimes going into legal actually will save you money and get the audit resolved sooner.
So last question for this week's episode, what guidance would you give some company, some leader who says, you know, I don't really want to be audited. How do I prepare? How do I stay prepared for that?
I mean, first of all, they should pull all their contracts and entitlements together. And I can't tell you how many times I get retained and they don't have that. And if you don't have it, don't ask for it, because that'll trigger an audit. But, you know, put some type of process in place where you're basically, every time you enter into a new maintenance agreement or a new license, you know, you're filing that away in a central place and tracking it.
I would say you're always going to be out of compliance. Most large organizations just can't help it. It's, as Pamela mentioned, it's too easy to over deploy. So with that in mind, manage for that. And what I would say is, for your top vendors or your high risk vendors, a baseline every year, and bring in the professionals who are going to be up to date on it and to understand that risk. And you may find you're up or you're over or you're under. You can decide what to do with it, but at least you have the information. That'll be certainly, and a process of governance, and Rory can comment better on this, where not only is this, you are certain it's getting done, but that somebody is checking that it's getting done. That's not just, yeah, IT have got that, and some sort of an assumption. No, it's not done. My experience has been, whenever we're called in, assumptions were made, and in a world where literally one processor can cost you $100,000 or up to $250,000 of something mistake being made, you do not wish to do that. So measure it consistently, have a process around it, and have the governance to check that it is being done, would be my recommendation.
Rory, Craig?
Yeah, to echo Pierce's points there, prevention is better than cure. I would stamp down on shadow IT. I know there's a feeling within service management actually that shadow IT is not that bad a thing. Oh yes, it is. I would also not allow people to buy software on their corporate credit cards either. Just top tip. Craig had that great 4-step process. You know, centralize, I think, was one of the expressions that he used. Wherever possible, do, because that gives you the control. To doff my cap in the direction of Steve Mullins, ex training manager at Flexera, you can't manage what you don't measure. And if you can centralize the data, you stand a better chance of enforcing some degree of measurement then.
Craig,
you know, it's really hard with Oracle because customers are in such different places with that vendor. We've found 78% of our clients don't have their contracts, right? So you're sort of starting off with a position of not having your agreements. So I think I would put people on a fact gathering exercise, you know, see if you can find those contracts, see if you have information on what you're using, you know, understand where your risks are, your big risks, and then go alleviate those. Unfortunately, you know, our business is sort of twofold. We have the firefighter business and then the fire marshal business, right? And I love the fire marshal business because we really help customers, but that's boring and customers don't want to spend money on it. But the firefighter business is when the audit's happening and they have the $12 million non-compliance. So you sort of have to figure out where you are in that model. And, you know, you just have to have expertise, whether it's in-house expertise or, you know, vendor-specific external expertise, whether it's legal or technical or business. You are overmatched from the vendor's perspective. I think we all said it. We do this hundreds of times a year or in our lives, and you might do it once or twice. So you're really, the system's rigged against you. So you just have to understand that when you're dealing with these vendors.
That is a great way to end this episode. I thank you all. Audience, come back next week and you can hear the next episode of this. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with Jeffrey's closing thoughts. Hello, everyone. This is Jeffrey. I'm back with closing thoughts. I want to thank Rory and Pierce and Pam and Craig for their insight, their knowledge, such a wealth of experience. Many great points in this first episode. Stay tuned for the next one next week. But some of the things we covered were trends in the IT asset management community, trends in the industry, some of the recent legal wranglings. Oh, isn't that interesting to hear about some of the legal cases? Also about software licensing and how to prepare for an audit. Those are great topics, and we could have gone on and on and on. And so it was a brief but very packed conversation. One thing that Rory said that really struck home with me, and I give him all the credit on this thought, is how he was telling a story of how one of his clients put in a SAM tool, software asset management tool, and it didn't deliver the expected results. So they wanted to get rid of that one and put in a new one. And then they called him and they needed help with the process. They needed help with all the non-tool pieces, the people, the process, all of that stuff. And then the tool supplements it. Without, the other way is, okay, let's let the tool do it all and you will always be disappointed. And that was the story that Rory gave us. And so we've seen that up close in service management leadership. And we want to encourage you, if you're having those kinds of issues, if you're just frustrated with your software asset management tool, your process, reach out to us. Rory's in the UK. He'd be happy to help if you're in Europe. And I don't want to speak for him. And so if you have IBM issues with licensing, reach out to Pierce. Legal help, especially defending an audit or renewals, reach out to Pamela and Craig for Oracle. It's such a great conversation. I know you'll enjoy next week's episode, so stay tuned. And once again, thank you for being a part of Service Management Leadership.